Hey, welcome back guys. This is Jason, KM4ACK. Today, let's talk about the RasPad. The good, the bad, and the ugly. Stick around, and we'll get right to it. Real quick before we get going today, I've got to give a shout out to these guys. They're my latest patrons over on Patreon. If you'd like to help support the channel, I'll leave a link to Patreon down in the description below. It's been about 2 months since I brought you guys that initial video on the RasPad tablet for using in the field. Since that time, I've had obviously a couple of months to actually get this thing out into the field and play with it a bit. So today I want to discuss what I like about it and what I don't like about it. Now, let me say right out of the gate, you don't even have to watch all of the video. Is this a good product? Yes, I still believe it's a good product. Will I personally be using it in the field going forward? No. And we'll get to that as the video goes on, but there's kind of the short version of whether I would recommend this RasPad for ham radio operation use in the field. So let me grab some notes here that I've got, and let's talk about this. So first off, this thing ran flawlessly with Build-A-Pi and the ICOM 705. Just the one cable going between the Pi and the radio, and everything else worked great. I was able to pull the GPS data off of the 705, and I had zero issues with the entire setup. No issues with software that I can speak of. Everything, like I said, just ran as you would expect it on a regular Raspberry Pi setup. The screen is nice and bright. It's got a good resolution. I found it was sufficient for running JS8 Call or FT8 or WinLink. So I had no problems whatsoever when it came to the resolution of the screen. It does have adjustable brightness, so and that's right over here on the side of the RasPad, so that made it really nice and easy if you needed to adjust it a bit brighter when you're out in daylight versus maybe when you're in clouds or coming into the evening. You might want to adjust that down a little bit dimmer so that you can preserve some of that battery life. We all know that screens are the #1 killer of batteries in devices like this. I did not notice any, or did not detect any noticeable RFI coming out of this unit. So I was pleasantly surprised with that. And like I said, 2 meter 440 HF didn't matter. I didn't really detect any RFI coming out of this. And that can definitely be an issue with some devices we use with the Raspberry Pi. Especially different sorts of buck converters and power hats and things like that. I love the fact that it's got built-in batteries. That was a huge plus for me, and it's got pretty decent battery life. I was getting 3 to 4 hours battery life out of this. A little bit more if you can dim the screen down. Maybe you're running in the shade or in the evenings. A little bit less if you're running that screen at full brightness. But all in all, I was very happy with the amount of time that I got out of the built-in batteries. And I like the fact that it's an all-in-one unit. It's just super convenient and handy to grab the one device. You've got your monitor, you've got your keyboard, you've got your batteries, you've got all of it built in. So that is really slick. One other thing that this does really well, and not all devices, in fact not all Raspberry Pi cases do this. This particular tablet gives you a way to put the SD card in without having to disassemble anything. So it's got a slot right over, let's see, it's not on that side, it's on this side. There's a slot right over here on the side of the RasPad where you can put the SD card out. Makes it super handy to swap it if you need to in the field. Now, let's talk about the on-screen keyboard. This is one of my big gripes about the RasPad, although I have to admit this is not the fault of the RasPad itself. We really only have one on-screen keyboard to choose from when it comes to the Raspberry Pi OS. and that's the Matchbox keyboard, and I just did not care for that keyboard on this particular tablet. I just found it clunky to use. It didn't seem to quite register correctly. It seemed, in my opinion at least, I had to press a little bit higher on the screen than where I actually wanted to click. But like I said, I don't really think that's a fault of the RasPad itself. I think it's just that on-screen keyboard. And we can always get around that by going with a Bluetooth keyboard, but now we're not, now we're losing that all-in-one capability. We're having to carry extra devices with us, so we're kind of back to where we were using the Raspberry Pi in a hotspot mode with maybe a Fire tablet or an old iPad or something like that. So take that for what it's worth. Battery life. Now, I know I said I liked the battery life, and I was actually pleasantly surprised. But the battery life can also be put into the con category, because the most I could get out of this was right around 4 hours. If you're trying to do a longer activation, maybe you're going to do a multi-day activation where you're going to go out and activate several parks. Maybe you want to use this at field day during the summer, or winter field day during the winter, where you're going to be using this over a 24-hour period. Well, those batteries just aren't going to cut it for that situation. So you're going to have to figure out something else. The other thing that I found with the batteries is they seem to self-discharge. So if you just leave them sitting for about a week, you're definitely going to notice that they have discharged at least part of the way down. I didn't find them to be completely dead, but I didn't find them to be full and ready to go. So each time before I headed out, if I'd let it sit for a week or so, I would go ahead and plug it up and recharge those batteries, get everything topped off so I was ready to go when I got into the field. So 2 more things here on the list. One is, this thing is just clunky. I just don't care for the form factor of it. I get where they were going with the design of it. The wedge shape does make it kind of tilt back to the operator as he's using it. And I understand that. I understand that they had to go that route in order to accommodate the 3 18650 batteries that are inside. But personally, I just don't care for this form factor. That's a personal choice, a personal opinion, and you may completely disagree with me, and you may have no issues with the form factor at all. That's really going to be personal preference. What isn't personal preference, and the #1 thing that kills this device for me, is what it takes to recharge this device. The wall charger takes 15 volts at 2 amps. And I just find that to be excessive when it comes to recharging the batteries. I much prefer that I could run off of a 12-volt source. And if we're going to get into something that demands 15 volts at 2 amps, now you're right back into laptop territory, and you kind of defeat the whole purpose of using the Raspberry Pi and having that much lower power draw compared to a laptop or even some of the higher end tablets. Alright guys, well there you have it. There's my take on the RasPad. Like I said at the beginning of the video, I don't think it's a bad device. It just doesn't fit my specific needs for working with ham radio and the Pi in the field. If you found this information helpful, be sure to give us a thumbs up before you head off. We will see you guys on the next one. Until then, 7-3.